Hello and welcome to Horse Chats. We're so glad you're here today. My name is Brittany and I'm the communications manager with the Livestock Conservancy. And here with me today, I have some awesome extra special guests to talk about the amazing Puerto Rican Paso Fino horse. We're so excited to talk about it today. We have Charlene Couch, who is our senior programs manager. Thanks for joining us today. And we have Alejandro Romero. Thanks for joining us. We're so excited you're here.
Hi, thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself and Alejandro?
I will. I'm Charlene. As Brittany said, I work as a senior program manager. My heart of hearts, though, is all about horses. I have 3 at home, and none of them are Puerto Rican Paso Fino. So I would really like to learn more about this breed. With us is Alejandro Romero. He is a longtime devotee of the Puerto Rican Paso Fino. He has a great deal of history and background in the breed, and he's also done a lot of research on his own. Alejandro, would you like to kick off the show with your slides and tell us how you got into this business?
Perfect. Thank you for having me here, and I hope that that we spend these few moments here learning a little bit about something that is a passion of mine and many of my colleagues in the island of Puerto Rico, where I'm originally from, and where this breed came to be the oldest breed in the Americas. So how did I get involved in the breed? Well, as a child, I used to play baseball in a place in the naval base in San Juan, where I was from. So then in that same location, there was a very a good riding arena very near that I could walk, and I see the horses in the horse show. So then I tried to play bat, so then they benched me. I was quite a good baseball player, but I didn't have passion for it. So then I play bat in purpose, so then they bench me, so then I can go to the bathroom and escape and stay looking at the horses. And most of the horses there were jumping horses, but what caught my attention was the specifics of the Paso Fino and how they gait and how majestic and regal they were in just a short body. So I loved them and the passion that came with all the breeders and the showers at the time.
Wow.
So that's I become a breeder at 16 years old when I purchased my first horses, and that was one of the pictures there. But before that, I wanted to learn a lot about the breed, so I became a judge. At the time in the late 80s, there was a municipality that have courses, formal courses to prepare people for to be Paso Fino judges. There was a riding arena, and then they held it in there, and it was an initiative by the government's office, few of them, and I was probably the last one that graduated. They did it like for 3 or 4 years, and I was the last graduate and the youngest to go to the and you see the picture in the left. That's me in an important competition there. I was the national for one of the organizations. So I competed a little bit. I took riding lessons from 2 of the most knowledgeable people, Doña Soli Sotomayor, who was my mentor, and also Ramon Ruiz-Estero. That were people that were very important in the breed. For the people that are in the Paso Fino, they know who they are. They were quite important people, and they achieved a lot. I then went to college, and I became the executive director of the Paso Fino Regulation Office, which means that I have to market the breed, I have to clear up the registry, and then I institutionalize the DNA test and the microchipping of the breed in order to prevent for fake papers and things like that. So I gain a little bit of a reputation of being the pedigree researcher that didn't allow other mods to get into the stud book. So I was quite committed with that. And with that, I just want to explain you what Paso Fino means and where they came from. So Paso Fino is the name of a breed, and they are descendants of the original stock brought from the Iberian Peninsula, which is today known as Spain, in the 1500. They call it now the colonial Spanish horse. It was before the Andalusian horse, or what is called the pura raza española. At the time, no such horses existed. They evolved into that later on. So then the stories say that in the 1500, these horses came with the conquerors. We know the participation of the Spaniards in colonizing. So in that process of colonizing, they brought the horses. So then there were different types of horses that they brought, and they were not Spanish horses, as I mentioned. So then these horses were, some of them were gated and some of them were trotting horses. So there were larger horses for work and there were cavalry horses. So then in Puerto Rico, people start selecting that in the 1700 already, with the herd that works in Puerto Rico, they populated other places in the Americas. And there was already noticeable, as you can see, that the gait was different than all the horses in Europe. And at the time, they call it the Indigenous Gate, which is very interesting that they use that word, because what that means is that that breed was different than any of the other breeds already by 1700. We don't have any records of those other than acquaintance from research that we have done in history books and chronics and things like that. So the isolation of the island allowed to export animals to other American places. The use of the horse in Boriken, which it was known at the time, that was the indigenous name, were for transportation, and there was the other ones that was for work. So with them, they came the donkeys and they came the larger breeds, but they were not popular because there's a lot of mountains in Puerto Rico and there's a lot of water. So they found that these smaller horses were better to move from one place to another. And it's a small island, so they eat less food. So that's how the breed got developed.
Wow, yeah. So they've been on this side of the world for a long time.
Yes, it's they've been for probably 300 years. There was no imports of any horses at the time. They need to have permission from Europe, from the crown, to import these animals. So as you see, by the 1700s, there's already horses, and we see that in this painting, which is iconic in the island. Is one of our first international painter. He did this painting of the dama a caballo and a woman riding a horse, and we see that she's riding at the genet. That's what the way that females rode at the time, and it's a socialite, as we would call it, riding on the side of the saddle and the horse or ornate. But what is interesting is that this is already a horse that is in diagonal, but it's a broken diagonal gait, and you can see in this picture. So the standards of this breed, uh, they are based on genetic in gait, conformation, performance and versatility, and temperament. They have conformation with a comfortable and an advancement of the gait. That's what were noticed at the time by the people that wrote the chronics. So we're going to get a little bit more into the standards now. So if I got this interesting quote that was from Claudio Corte in 1562, 3 years after the end of the Great Italian Wars, when the author described that length of the qualities of the genet as horses useful to war. According to Corti, the genets were one of the most commonly used horses by the Spanish light cavalry. Spanish heavy cavalry use a different breed, which Corti refers to as villanos. So we are assuming by all these treaties and writings that there were two different breeds of horses that they use. So it is that we can assume that this same happened in America when they breed these horses. It's important to understand that the first places that Columbus and the colonizers arrived was not in South America, were Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and Cuba. But what happened is that the first horses that arrived to Dominican Republic, they all there was a hurricane when they arrived, and then they dispersed. So then they have to brought more, and then there were horses that came to America by the Dominican Republic, but they were uh, they needed to come to Puerto Rico and they have the permit. But the first stop was Dominican Republic. Drop all the boats. Imagine how these horses came with people on those small ships, and for them to just land. The horses, they need to throw the horses in the ocean, and the horses swam to the border, right? So then there's indigenous people there. Imagine what they felt. So what were the composition of these horses? So we have the Spanish Genet, we have the Berber, which is an African horse, and other Spanish breeds that are mostly from the northern part of France. Remember that Spain, before 1492, before all this colonization, Spain was conquered by Arabic people. That's the Al-Andalus Empire. And they brought their horses, so then they were not Arabic, they were Berber horses from the nomad tribes of there's still some of this breed in Algeria and Morocco still intact into today. And then the original founding lines, we will see these pictures. We are assuming, and we're having a project to identify this with the Etalon Genetics Lab to find out which one of these breeds is the more similar to the Puerto Rican Paso Fino, because we know that we have some goats in Puerto Rico that they only exist in Canary Islands. Those are the only two places that it exists. And because they were isolated in Puerto Rico, they were almost getting extinct in the Canary Islands. So then they are trying to just relate those two breeds, and they were. So then they are trying to recuperate the Canary Island breed with this breed. So that's the good thing of science, and that's the good thing of technology that allow us to those opportunities to just recuperate and preserve the breed.
Right, that's right. Can you go back, Brittany, just real quick? The image you showed there at the bottom. I don't know if folks can see it. Would you just quickly talk through the circle there that shows the contribution of other?
Yeah, if you can enlarge that image, so then you just go into this. This is one of many. We are doing the ancestry. Now there's accessibility to do the ancestry composition of every horse. What you see there is the composition of one of many horses. We are starting to see a pattern, and most of them they're Iberian horse. But that doesn't mean, and it's very clear that you see that when you say Iberian horse, it doesn't mean Andalusian. Iberian horse, it's all from the peninsula. And with that have given us the opportunity to trace down through the readings that we already knew, and we have had done research, is that there were other different breeds in Spain that were not the Spanish horse as we know it today. And they're still there. And that's why the relationship that we're going to trace. But also the Paso Fino has been in the island for so many years. It wasn't called a Paso Fino until the 1800s, but in that process, it was a colony of Spain. So then from the 1800s in advance until today, there were other instances that there were some other combinations that we don't know. Also, in Spain, there was also mixes, right? Because you have it's in Europe, and horses travel and horses breed, and we don't have the resources of science that we have today. So it has a little bit of percentage of carriage horses, and also European heavy horse and North Sea, which the North Sea is just the Icelandic horses and from Finland and that area, and Norway and Sweden, which we are thinking that probably some of the buckskins come from those European northern, and then related of thoroughbred. We know that thoroughbreds are almost in any breed, and thoroughbreds is now a purebred, but at one point it wasn't. So this doesn't mean that the horse is not purebred. What it means is that this is their ancestry composition of the breed in general, and it fluctuates. The only thing that doesn't fluctuate much is the amount of Iberian. but the other ones, the percentages go up and down. And then we are still in the early stages of research to just find out what is the more comprehensive model of the horses. We have genetically tested around 25 horses now. It's costly, and we do it through Etalon because of the tools that they provide us to work with them.
That's terrific.
And this is also important to know because that give us, and we were going to talk in some of the next slides. You can pass that one, because some of the gate importance, like you see there, you have the I put the two breeds that we think the Puerto Rican horse looks more. It's like the Jeanette, which is extinct today. Now there's a process of recuperating a Spanish horse, Spanish Jeanette in the United States, but it's a recreation. It doesn't have the original authentic bloods of the Jeanette. But then we have the Berber, and if you look at the right, that's a national conformation champion in the island, and that horse that you see there looks like these horses, and these are different centuries apart. Next one, please. And then again, these are the other horses that, by looking at them in their conformation wise, once in a while we have these recessive genes that pop out, and then these horses look like this one. And then we have the horses in the de la Marisma, which is in southern Spain. Let's just remember that when the Spaniards came to the islands, when they were it was easier in the process of colonization to grab the horses that were there. And the horses that were there were those ones that are today savages, horses that are also in danger. And when I went to Spain to look at them, I couldn't see them, but because they're wild and you don't know where they are. It's a big park and thousands of acreages, and sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. So because I wanted to know, when I went to Morocco, I saw the resemblance of the barb horse, right? And I wanted to see the resemblance of this horse. And the Galiceno is another one horse that is almost extinct in Spain, because when they did the Spain as Spain, and they created their own breed of horses, which is what we know today, the Pura Raza Española. And then they have other breeds too, but that's sort of the one that they the school in Andalusia. So then all the other horses got displaced to a second plane, right? And this I bring this because in all my reading that I have seen, these are the horses. Sometimes we just see, where does this conformation come from? Because the Pura Raza Español, some of them don't look and they don't gate the same way as the Paso Fino. So it is very interesting to understand the origins of the breed in order to understand why they gate and why they look the way they look. It's not that they're small, they're not that they're ugly. Every breed is important, and they're bred for certain purposes. And then I think the misconception that a small horse that looks certain way is ugly, because you have a preconceived notion of a Spanish horse, and it's a prototype already that exists, and you think that everything needs to fit that box. When in fact, when you know where they come from, you know that you will have this because these are their ancestors. So that is very important. Next slide, please. So then this is the most ancient photograph that we have of one of the horses in today's pedigree. This El Manchado is from 1893, I believe. That was a horse that is documented in the history books as a horse that won some of the gate competitions at that time. At that time, we have documented that we have Paso Fino shows, and the name of the breed was Paso Fino. And it was a Palomino, and you see that's a color that got prejudiced for many times, and I will explain why it got discriminated. But we can trace the mother line of Dulce Sueno, who's the foundation sire of contemporary times, and when the stud book got created, it got created with those bloodlines mostly in 1943, when the horse was almost extinct. So that's a very important photograph, and this is courtesy courtesy of Hostos Gallardo, and the link is at the end of the presentation. Next, please.
Okay.
So then, these are the most important things that you see there. There's genetics. What about genetics? Well, I explained a little bit that horses don't grow up under a palm tree. They have an ancestry, they have a history. So in order to be called a Paso Fino, we know that a Paso Fino is the name of a breed. It's also a descriptive way of walking for certain breeds, that you can train a horse that have some the genetics of DMT3 in their bloodlines to gait, and that's a mutation. And our horse is homozygous on that, and that's very important for you to know, because our horses are naturally born with the gait, and it's through the genetics that it occurs. But if you notice, I put gait in the center because that's the main important component of the breed. If it doesn't gait, there's something wrong with it. So then we need to check where this horse came from. Now with DNA, it doesn't happen as much as before. So in order to have that gait, they have to have those genetics, and then those genetics need to reflect in the conformation. So in the conformation, they're normally between, the ideal would be between 14 to 50 hands, and that around 56 to 62 inches. It is not a pony. It is a little bit larger than a pony, but it's smaller than larger breeds. So then it is in between, and I think that's a very good point to make, because you have quarter horses that are 15 hands and they look giant, right? It's just a petite, compact bone structure, but the size sometimes is deceiving. And when you ride them, some of them have a very high headset, and then you will feel that you are in a bigger horse, when in fact it's a medium-sized horse. We also like to make a point for people to understand. The people that are in the breed also sometimes get confused, and they don't understand this concept that there's two types that we have. We have the Spanish type and the Berber type, and it's okay that we have that diversity in the breed. In thoroughbreds, they also have those two different types of horses. One that have a longer neck, and then they're faster. Shorter neck, and they're faster, and with more impulsion in the back. Same happen with the quarter horses, and then you have the more that are more elongated, that have more endurance. We see this also in the Arabic breed. So it's not that they don't breed through type; it's that we have two types of in the breed. We like it as you see there, that has a temperament that is sweet as ice cream, hot as the sun, and fast as the wind. And I will love that. We have with very docile and very gentle, that the whole family can enjoy them. And of course, we like horses today, in today's world, when and they were at the origins of the breed. They were bred for performance and endurance and versatility. So these are most of the components of the breed. But it's very important to know that the breeders for centuries concentrate in the gait. Next one, please. So what is different about these horses than others? That the gait is natural and it's very smooth gait. They call it the Cadillac of the horse, of the horse population, and it is not diagonal and it is not lateral. People say, "Oh, it's a 4-bit lateral gait," but it's not. It's just that visually it's lateral, but if you have a lateral gait, it's an ambler horse, right? And these are not ambling horses. They can go in an ambling. We sort of breed that out a little bit, but we also don't want diagonal horse that then you need to force them with training to go into gait. So that's the big difference with other breeds. These are born to type, and they're naturally that way. What the trainer does is just show them right, left, back, stand, march, right? These things are the things that the horses are trained, and they're very easy to train because the gait is already natural. They're born with gait. It's 4-bit, what means that they're. Then I put a term there that is called isochronic. And isochronic, whoever is in music know that 4-bit need to be. There's 4 steps in each one of the legs. When the horse raises the leg, hold it, put it down, and step, right? And each one of those 4 needs to be synchronized. So then they take the same amount of time in the whole process in the 4 of them. And that's why we call that would be the shock absorbers of the horse when they move, right? So each one of those legs have to have the same time if each one of those beats in order to be smooth and to have that gait that we all want. And that's what judges, we look for that. So also, we don't want that it raise more than 5 inches or 6 inches from the ground. If it raise all the way to the knee, we know that it is still a Paso Fino, but then we just try to breed with one that is more smoother. We also don't want the ones that barely use the knees and they're very low, because then if there's stones, they can just trip, right? So it's that balance that is not too high and not too low, right? And we try to breed that and not just do it through artificial works like other breeds do, that they just put special trims in the legs and in the tails, and so we don't do that in the breed. The other thing is the we want a quick footfall and also short distances, right? But there's also the ones that are more extended and they're more performance and pleasure and endurance. So we have those two different types within the breed because they're for different purposes, and that's good to have it. And they are all registerable horses. Next one, please. So these horses, is important for you to know that they were selected for centuries for beauty and gait. And again, I will say beauty and gait. These are horses that are pretty. Paso Finos is the only breed based from Puerto Rico. It has 350 years of isolation that supported this creation, and it was for a comfort ride, parade, and exhibition. And if you see, these three are animals from different periods. And if you look, they are all very similar in conformation. They are related, but they are not close related. Like if you see the first one, he created his own family of bloodlines, the Leyte, and that bloodline is almost disappeared in Puerto Rico, but there's few horses that are direct descendants of the Leyte. We are talking from the 40s, right? 1945, and from 45 to today, how many years have passed? It's almost 80 years now. So in those 80 years, it's like two different, completely different families, right? And then you have Domingo. Also, Domingo is a horse that didn't produce much, but we can still have those bloodlines. And he goes back to a dam that was Galana, a very important dam in the breed. It's also important to know that for a period of time in the early stages of the breed, mares were not registered. They were pasture bred, and sometimes some of the animals you will see blank very back is because they didn't know who was the mare. They just grabbed the colt from pasture. That just got different in the 60s. It got amended, and from the 60s onward, those mares were registered. And today we have better mares in the breed than males, and we know through other breeds that the mare bloodline is the carrier of most of those more dominant and important traits in the breed. So and then on the right is Armani, which is a contemporary horse. He's already retired. He was also national champion. That's the one in the breeding program in Portland. This horse is related to Domingo, but it's not related to the other horse. And I brought it in. So you see that these three horses from three different generations, same color, they're all chestnut, they all look alike. Even though two of them are not related, you can put them together and then they look like they are family. And this is very important because when we talk about breeding true to type, these are the things that we look for. Next one, please. So population, there's a guesstimate of population of less than 2,000 animals around the world. And it's a guesstimate because we've been trying to collect this information. And the last official Puerto Rico government in the 2000s, they were around 2,500. So what does this tell us? That the population have decreased. We already know that there's less breeders. There's today around 300 breeders. They got divided between U.S. bloodlines and Puerto Rican bloodlines. and there's a reason why that I will go into there later. Australia has a small group of horses that are Puerto Rican as well and come from the Alicante line, a herd of a breeder that moved there and took them. We don't know what happened to them, if they get crossbred or whatever. We know that importing semen to Australia is not easy. So what is going to happen with those horses? We don't know with that population. The Dominican Republic population of Puerto Rican horses, there's no individuals left. There was a period of time in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s that most of the population were Puerto Rican horses. What happened in Dominican Republic was that the person that was the main breeder was a dictator, Rafael Trujillo. So we know what happened to him. He got killed, and then the horses were associated to him. They call it Dominican horse, but they were really Puerto Rican horses, Puerto Rican bloodlines. And then some of those horses got dispersed, and most of them bred with Colombian. So then we have exported horses to France in the 60s. Those horses never reproduced. We have the same issue in Spain. The Queen of Spain owned a stallion. That stallion, we lost those bloodlines. We don't have those bloodlines anymore. Few mares carry very back, but from his same sire, but we don't have those lines. And then there's 2 or 3 individuals in the Virgin Islands. When we have more, we have horses in Venezuela that we exported in the 50s and 60s, and we have an idea that it probably allow for Colombian bloodlines to get that gate. Next one, please. So what is good and different about this horse? What are the uses of it, you might think? Where they're very versatile. So we use them for equitation, for horse therapy, for exhibition, for competition, for pleasure. And then I put a quote here for one of the riders in owner of the breed, and she said, "While the word is upside down, which we know it is, I am finding my peace with the horses," right? So this is a very beautiful quote, and I thought that it was very important to put in. And then these are images of the uses of some people. Some of them, I don't know, equitation for kids, pleasure riding, rescues, horse therapy. Those are some of the uses of the breed. They can do anything, and that's like any horse. You train them, and they're good. Next one, please. So what makes, and we have a video to show, if you can put it in. So what makes these horses so special? And this is an image of a horse that was in training at the time. Movement or that horizontal movement. So it's a perfect size, and it's so willing that everybody loves them when they ride them. Next one, please.
Let me just interrupt you real quick. Sorry.
Yes.
Your mic cut off when we put the video up. Can you say what you were starting to say before we came back in?
Yes, I was saying that the horse is the perfect size, is so willing, is so smart, is so gentle, and so smooth that when you ride it, you don't want to ride anything else.
Do you want to take a break and take some questions, or do you want to go to the next slide?
Let's just take some questions.
All right. Let's see. Hi, Thomas. Thanks for joining us today. Thomas says, I love gaited horses, interested in learning more about the Paso Fino. So we're glad you're here. Pal says, hola, Paso Fino horse breed, only one in the hemisphere. I love it. There's so much love for the Paso Fino right now. Jean says they're beautiful. Okay, I guess let me see if we've got any questions. Hi, Josie. Thanks for joining us. Josie says Armani and I are listening from the West Coast. That's awesome. Romaldo says, great presentation from Cesar. Thanks for the opportunity to get our breed known. That's awesome. Okay, we don't have any questions. We only have love for the Paso Fino. That's amazing.
Okay, thank you for the comments and for all the listeners. That make it more exciting.
Yes.
The next one.
Yes, let me pull that up.
So, what is so important about this breed in Puerto Rico? It is important to know to all our American fellows that Americas goes from Alaska to Patagonia. So, Puerto Rico was the best strategic place in the connection of those two worlds. So then our history in the horse breeds are very tight. Like Juan Ponce de Leon, who was the conqueror of Florida and the conquistador and the first governor of Florida, which was the oldest capital city in all the United States for all accords that we have in San Agustin. He took the horses that he owned in Puerto Rico, and he was the first governor of Puerto Rico as well. So he took all his horses and then he colonized. He have issues with the Columbus family, so then he decided to go further north, and then he went to Florida, and then from some of those herds we have today the Mustang. So Puerto Rico has been very, very connected to all the populations of all Americas. Also, Hernan Cortez took his horses to Mexico from Puerto Rico. There's it's all research done on those points. We can just look into some of that information. You send me an email and I can provide it. And also from to Peru and to Colombia, all those horses. Francisco Pizarro's brother was a breeder in Puerto Rico, and he took those horses to his sent the horses to his brother. So Puerto Rico was a very agricultural and important point because it was in the center. So it spread strategically to both north and east, north and west, and it was the closest place to go to Spain. So when they found that out, all the horses came through Puerto Rico. But then to import horses, we were more exporters than importers. So this Puerto Rican horse is protected by an agricultural act from 1988. It has been declared the national sport since the 60s. We know the importance of the breed, and we are proud of it. It's a cultural manifestation, and it's the oldest breed documented in America. We just don't get credit because we are a colony of the United States, but we are part of the state as a territory. We are in this ambiguous relationship that we are not acknowledged as such, but even in immigration and when we try to export horses, you do quarantine to the U.S., but the U.S. horses don't do quarantine to Puerto Rico. So there's a lot of issues with that and politics that I'm not going to get into it, but it's important for people to understand and know that the Puerto Rican horse is also the American horse, right? It's also the U.S. horse. It is the horse of everybody. It was just that it was created and developed in a territory, but as a territory of the United States, is the oldest breed in the U.S. territory. So it is recognized by the Library of the Congress in the Cultural Legacy Project, and there were three important things, and one of them was the Puerto Rican horse, that the magnitude of it, and it's a patrimony of intangible culture. So it is important, these things, and then if you go to the next slides, I'm going to get into it a little bit more of what I mean by art, culture, and history. It's been written in magazines. There's been kings that have owned these horses. The Queen of Spain owned one. The President Lyndon B. Johnson owned some Paso Finos. He saw them in the Parade of the Roses in California, where we said that we sent 3 horses I believe was in the 70s, and he won the Grand Marshal Award. It was a beautiful tree with the horses riding behind it, and it just was very impactful. So next slide, please. So then if you go deep into the culture, there's books, there's crafts, there's songs, there's visual art, there's poetry, there's short stories, there's even films made about the Paso Fino horse. For those that are avid Disney movie watchers and love Disney World, there was a film in the 70s, I believe, that it was called Cristobalito, the Horse of the Conquerors. And that horse was a Palomino, and it's that horse that you see on the right. That was a horse owned by Ismael Girot, and that's the guy that owns the horse. And if you see the movie, if you haven't watched it, it's a very interesting movie. it shows how smooth they are, and the trainer, the rider who was a kid that is preserving this horse. He has a cup of jello at the time, but it was supposed to be wine, and then you need to do a, 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 a competition with that, and it was a competition that we did. We used to do it in the old days to show which was the smoothest horse. There's a competition in the US that they still do it, no longer in Puerto Rico. We only do it for exhibition. But in the US, they do the glass of water. And then what they do that all the horses ride around, and the riders carry, while they ride, a cup of wine. And at the end, they measure. They put the same amount to all, and at the end, they measure who spilled less. And it's very tight because they're very smooth, right? So a horse that is not gated, and even if it is a very uh, jumpy horse, right? Like it has to do with angulations of the bone structure and what's not. So then the one that spills less is the one that wins. So it's called the glass of wine competition. And then there are books about the breed that has been written about. So it is part of our culture. It's part of our heritage. Everybody in Puerto Rico knows about Paso Fino horses, and they know that they're from there. So it is important for people to understand that. Next one, please. So we calculate that we are around 300 owners split around the world. There's around 4 here in Canada that only have Puerto Rican horses. In the States, there's a little bit more. And in Puerto Rico, according to the active members of the organizations, when we put them all in total, it's around 300 owners. That's not a lot, but it's good enough to maintain the activities that preserve the breed. Next one, please. So a lot of horses, and we call it that the Paso Fino is a lot of horse in a small body. It's gentle, it's hot, but it's a horse very willing to please. And what makes it different than other breeds? If you see in that photography, you see that they come in different colors. They are for different things. There's the horse in the left was with one of the Miss Universe at the time. She was from Puerto Rico, and there was a homage for the horse, and she happened to give the award to the horse. The second picture is when they were riding the ribbon, and it's a very ancient traditional cultural activity that they did. They put all the horses need to ride, and they need to grab a ribbon, and then at the end they have to perform some sort of uh, the circles and all that, and then they whoever wins chose the ribbon, and they get to dance with the lady that the name was written in those ribbons. So it was a very old way of showmanship. The next image there is from the Parade of the Roses. The next other is the Dulce Sueno Fair, which is a horse show that is very cultural and is the most important show in Puerto Rico. People from the state goes and see it, and there's folklore, there's art crafts, there's music. The one down in the left, you see horses are so gentle that they're in pasture, and an older lady can go and pet them. That's my mother with her mare, and have to her own filly and an orphan, and the mare just nurse it. The other one is my dad with one of his horses way back, a Paso Fino horse, and then the one in the right is a buckskin and a roan. Roan right now there's only, and the good thing about having a small population is that you know that if they don't come from these certain lines and all of a sudden pop a horse like that, if you know a little bit about genetics and colors, you know that horse couldn't come from other lines unless it's this bloodline. So then we know the people that are in the breed knows that information, and it's very good to have it. That's one of the advantages of having a small population. Next one, please. So other advantages that differentiate this breed from others is that it's confirmed homozygous for gait. They have the DMT3. Yes, DMT3 gate, and they in the study that we've been doing, all of them has it homozygous. When they did it originally, they tested all the horses, and we were 99%. I tried to find what was the 1% that didn't do it. It's research; they cannot share it. But I think I have an idea that horse probably was a half breed, and somehow got into the Puerto Rican stud book and way back. So that might be it, but we don't get provided that information. So then I just say, well, I'm going to do my own study with the horses that I know. And I'm going to go to some of those that I know that were not supposed to be in the stud book, not to take them out, but just to everybody to be aware, because if we are known as being homozygous, you can prevent for that to disappear, right? So it is very important to know which ones are the ones that are non homozygous. So then just to try to breed only with homozygous. If you have two that are non homozygous, then you will have a problem of bringing the diagonal gate into a bloodline or a family. And we don't want that. So they're homozygous for national smooth gate. They have the unique tiger eye mutation. It's not that not all horses have them, not all breed. It's said that the only breed that has it is the Puerto Rican horse. Of course, there are half-breed, but again, they have to have the Puerto Rican bloodlines in both ends in order for it to be recessive of being passed on. So we know if the other breed that have this tiger eye, and it tests the tiger eye variant, we know that some way along the trail, there was a Puerto Rican horse that we don't know where the mutation happened. What we know is that we have certain bloodlines that pass it, and then when we want to bring it, we just breed through those. So we are not confirmed. There's no genetic test done for DSLD, but we haven't had cases of DSLD like other breed, which is the degenerative suspensory ligament, this mites, like other breeds have. There's no silver dilution. I know other breeds just go and they look fantastic, but some of those horses they are blind, some of them. So if they are homozygous and have a double copy of it, so then we don't have that problem. It's non-existent in our breed. We don't have silver horses. And then there's the small population allow us to breed true to type and quick ID of any genetic healthy problems. Next one. And these are the advantages of the horse. So we have no primitive markings and dorsal stripes. So we know that if a horse have that, we know that along the path, it has another, or it was a mutation. And if it is not a mutation, then we know that there was an introduction of some breed in the ancestry, right? So then we just put a mark on it, and not that we're taking them out, but because they're already there. But then we're more mindful of who to breed with. So then we have the Savino markings, and there's a variety of them, and then no lethal white, but lots of color. We don't have a challenge with lethal white. We don't have that in our breed. So then when a paint pops out, we just love them. Next one, please. So the Paso Fino breed is the ancestor of the American Paso Fino, which is the most known in the United States. They call it Paso Fino, and then they added pure Puerto Rican Paso Fino. But no, the name of the breed is Paso Fino. All the others are the ones that should have the label beside, not our horse that was the original. Our horse is the Paso Fino. The other ones are the American Paso Fino. The Paso Iguayano is a descendant of the Puerto Rican horse, and it's from Higüey, Dominican Republic. They are now established in a breed. It's very recent. They have the Cuban Paso or Cuban Paso Fino or Paso Siboney. They were all descendants of horses that were imported. They called it at the time Puerto Rico Paso or Puerto Rico breed, and then they bred them, and then when they were in Cuba, they nationalized it and called it Cuban Paso, and some of those made it to the States and are in some pedigrees, and they call, oh, I have a Cuban Paso. If it is registered, you know that we can trace it back to Puerto Rican horses. The Dominican Paso Fino today is also a mix of the Puerto Rican and the Colombian bloodlines, and the modern Colombian Paso Fino, in order for them to fix the gate, they needed to use our Paso Fino. They are very sharp, very quick, and they also are very showy. Most of the horses in the States, and more of what you see in promotions, and if you type online, and they're very, 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 very fast, they don't sustain that gate. But they're very quick, and people go for that because they're very exciting. It's like a circus horse, and it's very beautiful horse, and it has a lot of grade. But it's also not a Paso Fino. When I was in a young person in the 70s and 80s, they didn't call it Paso Fino. They call it Colombian Paso. But and I'm not going to go into the debate, but there was a big challenge in the 80s because they basically stole the name and put it for commercial purposes. The first horses that went to the registries in the United States were all from Puerto Rico in the 50s, and the reason why is because that when the personnel from the armed forces came, and there were several bases in PR. The horses were their hobby, and they have barns in the bases. So what they did is that in the headquarters. So what they did is that they found it was cheaper to buy the horses because you can buy them for $50, right? Puerto Rico was very poor back in the 50s. So then they bought those horses for very low, and then the government, the federal government, the armed forces, traveled them to the US. So from the Ramey base, there was a group of Americans that, and we have all this documented, took all those horses to the United States. Some of them have papers, some of them have not. At the time, we have no mixes with any Colombian horses, but there were some crosses with Morgan horses and other breeds that then came with when the American cavalry invaded Puerto Rico. So there's a big history, and I'm not going to go in detail. That's just another chapter to talk about those different groups. But what is important is that most of those horses or those breeds are part of the Puerto Rican horse. And also, if you go back 2-3 centuries, even the Peruvian horse have some ancestry from the original horses that were bred in Puerto Rico. So they were not a Paso Fino horse at the time, but were the horses that were selected by breeders that were first and second generations of Spaniards in Puerto Rico already. So we can take some credit from that as well. So the picture there is Dulce Sueno, is we call it the father of the modern breed of Puerto Rican horses. He was a very prominent and important horse. He never showed, but he produced offsprings that in the origins of the first organization in 1943, the second actually, but the first official one that we know, but that have been alive for all this amount of years until today. Most of the first champions and the offspring populated the stock book. Next one, please. So we know that it's in danger. So SOS, it's important to preserve them. Next one. And why it is, what are the consequences, what have created that they're in danger? Well, the first thing is inbreeding. With inbreeding comes a very small amount of population. It has its advantages, but when people don't know and this population is limited and they breed and breed and breed without the knowledge, it can change and shift the breed to a different direction, and also passes along all the health issues that we don't want to have in the breed. It's a small population. Few of larger breeds are only left, few of them. There's not herds of horses that breeders that have 40, 50, or 100 horses. They're all small breeders that with less than 20 horses in their herd, usually are between 10 and 12. There's few now that are in the process of having more. The Puerto Rico colonial status, we get everything that come from to Puerto Rico come from the States, and a higher price, so the costs are higher. Also, the use of the name from other breeds have then created a huge confusion. And because our horses are small and are not as accessible, everybody wants a Paso Fino and they're not educated. So then they just go and buy whatever it said Paso Fino as long as it has a paper, right? But talk to an expert. asked about it before you get and purchase anything, because you might be buying a mix, a hybrid, which is an American Paso or a Colombian Paso, or one with a lot of mixes that you don't know, even some with Peruvian horses. Cost of breeding is very expensive, but it also hasn't changed. It you can pay for a stud fee 40 years ago $1,000. Today is $500 to $1,000. So it's affordable. But when people are in the distress of living on an island, or the limitation of distances in the state, it's come pricey. Exporting animals is costly, and exporting semen is costly as well, because that doesn't mean that when you export semen and cheap semen, the mares are going to take in the first try. So I have done it, and I have spent $2,000-$3,000 on a mare to be bred by a good horse that I want, and I end up breeding with a horse that is in the barn because you cannot afford it, right? Sometimes you cannot breed the mare with the stallion that you want because of accessibility, and it costs moving horses. The quarantine regulations for export are not equal, and it's costly as well. I can give you an example. Just to get a horse from Puerto Rico to the U.S. is just without doing paying the vet bills or whatever, it's $3,500, right? Just that. If you have 10 horses in a herd, and if you buy a horse for $2,500, so the prices are very low because of the cost of exporting. Some people just go and buy whatever they have accessible nearby. Limited markets due to the many gated breeds, and they're getting very popular now. People with sore backs and back problems, and therapy. Information rarely available other than Spanish language. We are trying to translate these documents, but it's very daunting and nobody pays for it. And then we don't get grants, or it's all by volunteer work, and it's difficult to do it. We're working on it. And this is an example. So thank you for allowing us to share this information. The lack of knowledge of the breed is an education factor that affects the preservation of the breed. The cost of land in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is an island. You cannot buy land, flat lands, which is where you breed horses best. The lack of pasture, it makes it very difficult. The import of food and costs to upkeep. Everything, we don't produce any of those food in PR. The grass is very high in sugar, so then we need to be giving protein, and then we have founders problems and other health issues that are not ingrained in the breed, but people think they are, that the horse is lame, because it's not that they are. We have done the testings and we've noticed that they're not prone to laminitis. It's just the management. They're in stalls all the time, because if you put it out on pasture, they get stolen. Wow. So the generational issues, all their people and all their trainers have died or have died. So then the new people have lost a lot of information. I was very lucky that I started very young, and I had great mentors that pass on the information to me very kindly. And that's why I just like to do this, because I think it is important that we just share this information openly. And the ones that are starting in the breed just work with us, listen to us. And that's the way that we pass all this knowledge, right? They were used to improve gait and temperament in other breeds, distances between distribution of bloodlines. These are the things why the horse is endangered, and that's why it's listed in the Livestock Conservancy as such. Next one. Any questions through here?
We do have a couple of questions.
Good.
Hi, Gabrielle. Thanks for joining us today. Gabrielle says, sometimes tall people don't want to ride a smaller horse because they feel too big for it. Have you had any apprehension with your breed?
Well, I just tell them, ride them. when you ride a sport car and you love it, so why not ride give the opportunities? They don't feel small when you ride them. There's the Icelandic horse is smaller, and Icelandic people are not short, and they don't have a problem riding them. I think it's a matter of people's ego. It's not what breed is that the breed is too small, and people don't want to ride it. Ride them, and then when you ride them and you see that you don't bounce and you don't need to stress yourself posting on a horse, and that you can enjoy a very smooth ride, these horses are not for racing. They can do all that. But if you're looking for a bigger horse that is gated, there's other breeds. Go there. But don't diminish this breed that is not for you, right? There's no need and no point to do that.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you for the question. That's a good question. There's a lot of that.
Yeah. Hi, Kevin. Kevin says, apologies if this was already covered. If you don't mind touching in it, I'm curious about the role of the breed in participating in DSLD research.
Yes, they did. They did some genetic testing, and they didn't find any information about concerns of the breed, as other breeds has a sort of a predisposition based on their gaits, and we don't like to have a very long. It's related to conformation as well as how there's some breeds that are prone to it by genetic, how they breed them through the prototype to get certain. And I want to pinpoint breeds. That's why it's harder for me to give a more detail on specifics, because I think every breed, which whatever, if they have this problem, I'm pretty sure that they will figure it out how to resolve it for the preservation of their breed, now that they have the science to do it.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, this is a long one. Josie says, I have noticed from experience that because they lead off on the hind, it spooks people that ride ungated horses, because when riding a quarter horse, the feeling of the rear moving first means they are acting up. But with the Paso Fino, it is just the drive forward. Any suggestions to help people learn about this movement to introduce them to the Paso Fino when starting out?
I think the best way to do it is walk beside them. Walk beside them and look at them, listen to them, see others people riding. So then you understand how the gait it is. This is a small horse with spirit. There are ones that have more spirit than others, and they are very nervous. They have some Arabic blood on Berber, Arab blood on them. So we know that they're hot horses, and that's what makes them excited. And just ride them and then walk them and then feel the changes in the gait, and then you would understand that it is pretty normal. It is how the gait are. It's how all gaits are. Just study about mechanics, and you will figure it out a little bit about.
Thank you. Good question. There's one more. Kate says, do you find that the population of owners is open to doing genetic testing, or is it a small group of owners that supports your activities?
Well, we are getting more people interested. And remember that every full comprehensive test is $300 plus the amount of dollars that it requires to register a horse in all the organizations. At the end, just to register a horse is over $500, between $500 and $700. So you're thinking that the value of the horse, you can buy a quarter horse for $500, right? So I will require, if you're a new owner, that you have these horses tested, or you tested before it, because you don't, as an owner, you should be responsible and you should know what are the challenges that the horse that you're purchasing has. You can do this test yourself as part of the agreement, and because if you're looking for color, it's good to know what colors you will get from that mare or from that stallion. If you want to have horses with tiger eyes, and that's something that you want to preserve in your bloodline, so then you do the testing, and you know that if it is not a carrier, you will never have that unless you breed with a horse that has a stallion or a mare that has the tiger eye trait, because it's recessive. So just go and learn about the breed. And yes, we thank you for the question. It's very important. People are getting more interested as we talk more about it, because people, uh, it costs a lot to upkeep a horse, especially an endangered breed, and then you just want to just to preserve the best of the population in order to preserve the whole breed. And yes, there has been 4 or 5 breeders that slowly, actually more. We have a group of probably 7 to 8 small breeders and one very large breeder that have done the testing, and it's very important. And then we're sharing the results as well, so that's good for the future of the breed.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, both Kate and Alejandro here, because we have a webinar coming up on August 12th, and it is about DNA testing in horses, and it speaks to some of the challenges of trait testing and disease testing, and what do you do with those results, and how do you use them in your breeding program rather than throw away genetics completely. So tune in if you want to, because I think that information will be touched on as well there.
Yeah, and I would like to see that, because this is all brand new. Like 5 years ago, we don't have any of this. 10 years ago, we have none. So this is as science evolve, also breeds evolves, and then we want an evolution that preserves the purpose of the breed. We don't want to use the breed and create a new breed based on this new testing either. We just want healthy horses, which is the importance of preservation of those bloodlines. So, and it brings us to the next slide, that the importance of the bloodlines in the US and Puerto Rico. We know that the US and Puerto Rico have the advantage that yes, we have quarantines, but they're not as difficult as if you were importing horses from other parts of the world. But through separation of around 30 to 50, 40 years already, we have the diversity of lines. There's bloodlines in the United States that we don't have in Puerto Rico, and I can just mention 3 bloodlines here, like the Deleite line, the Dilemma line through Alicante, and also the Deleite comes through Bolero line. We have boleros, a lot of boleros offsprings in the States, grandchildren or great grands, but we have it alive. The Deleite line and the Alicante, that is a Dilemma line, and that's very important to know. And there's other 2 more, like Boricuita and also the Toledo line. Those lines, we don't have it in the island anymore, because those horses were imported young and they stayed there, and we didn't have access to breed back and forth, or bring back horses. It was costly. They were in different locations in the States. They were basically in the Texas area and the northern Oregon area and Oklahoma, and there were some in Kentucky and upstate New York and Florida, and of course the bigger major cluster of Paso Fino were in South Carolina, because there were breeders there that have had a large herd, and which is Palmetto Pride Paso Finos. They have been probably the biggest breeder of Puerto Rican horses, mixing the Puerto Rico lines and the American lines for many years. They have been successful, and when they do the shows, the horses win most of the time. Mm-hmm. But then there's other breeders that have a combination of bloodlines. It's important to understand that what line breeding means, what inbreeding means, what outcrosses breed and outbreeding means, because people get confused. Things that refreshing bloodlines, you have to go out of the breed. When we have those inside the breed, so genetics is very important to know the basic concepts of it. So the importance of the U.S. and Puerto Rico working together is the preservation of certain bloodlines and families. As I mentioned, there are families in Puerto Rico that they're none, and that stallion that is in Oregon right now, he is the only surviving offspring of a direct line of horses that no longer exist, and there's not many of them. What it also helped is to lower the COI, which is the coefficient of inbreeding, very high in both places. So then they're all Paso Finos, and they're for different purposes. In the US, they focus more on pleasure and trade. In Puerto Rico, they focus more in competition and exhibition. So it is very important to acknowledge that both are important in the breed, and there's the two types, and it's good to come in and go out, come in and go out, maintaining the same bloodlines and not just go out crossing that then the horses don't look like each other anymore. But it's just the process of just think ahead of 20 years. As if you're a breeder, just think ahead of 20 years and where do you want to go, and see yourself in that place, and what kind of herd do you want, what kind of bloodlines do you want, what kind of contribution you want to do to the breed if you're going to be a serious breeder. If you want to be a competitor, just buy a really good quality horse from a well-known breeder and allow and look after the horse very well, pay it well, because there's not many of those. And when you retire the horse of competitions, allow other breeders to breed from them if it is a good quality breeding animal. Bring back all foundation lines, lows in the island, and the modernized the lines in the USA. And we say modernizing is not that the US are obsolete or archaic, it's that are not modern in Puerto Rico. The modern lines in Puerto Rico are different. The modern lines in the US are different than the ones in Puerto Rico. There's not, it's just that I make the comparisons of modern lines because it is based in Puerto Rico. The whole competition and the whole culture is original from Puerto Rico. So that's the point of departure. It's not that the US are not good or are not better. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It's just that there's foundation lines in the US, there's foundation lines in Puerto Rico. They're just different bloodlines. They're separated by 30, 40 years now. And that's what we mean. Like in Puerto Rico, there's different entries at one point because there was more larger population, but now it's so concentrated that we need to go out. And I'm glad that we have other these populations in the US. Heterozygous is known for bringing health benefits, and which include longevity and fertility. And those are things that are very important if we talk about preserving a breed. Next one, please. So things to do to preserve the breed. This is my favorite part. Be a caring owner and let others ride. Share your horses, competition or endurance or trail or pleasure. Let others ride it. They will get hooked on it. Breed intelligently if you are considering a breed, and use science and technology. Exchange and collaborate between breeders. We are doing it all the time now. It's the only way to preserve the breed. Get educated and educate others. Feed well the Paso Finos and care for them. Invest in breeding animals and breed them or make them available to other breeders. Gelt and don't breed animals with conformation, gait, or health problems. That's very important. Good quality. Some people say that a good quality stallion makes a good quality gelding, but again, if it has the quality to be a stallion and it's too much horse for you, don't be selfish and pass it along to someone that could use it in a breeding program. And if it is a mare and she have the outstanding quality and you want outstanding quality to look at it, don't be selfish and share it. We find people that buy a great champion mare and it's beautiful and in everything, and then it's out of the breed because the person don't want to go to the risk of losing the mare. We cannot be selfish with this breed. It's for the next generations to enjoy it, and it's very important to know that. Preserve foundation lines, make preservation breeding, which is important. Most people don't do it. Most people breed for competition. Attend horse shows, donate to different organizations who preserve the breed. And these are my favorite one. Do not crossbreed. Do not crossbreed. Did I say it again? Do not crossbreed. Next one, please. So these are some links of all the organizations and some breeders, and some links to the legislation. It's a protected breed in Puerto Rico. There's not much lately about funding to do the preservation program. There was a time in the 90s and early 2000s that Agriculture Department has an embryo transfer program. It was a pioneering program and preservation of semen. Sadly, with the changes of government, it all goes to waste. Today, that would have it was designed for being 20 years in preservation, cryopreservation, but somehow along the path and the hurricanes and bad administrations, the all that work and all those dollars spent in that process got wasted. If we would have had that then, we would have had to preserve some bloodlines that are disappeared today. And that's very important for you to know that one is lost forever. Next one, please. This is me. This is who I am. It's been an honor and a privilege to talk to you, and I am open to question. All my information is there. I understand that this is going to be shared publicly, so just send me an email or Facebook or a text, and I would be happy to just guide you and lead you to the right direction needed. Any questions?
Thank you, Alejandro. This was amazing. I'm going to leave these slides up, so if you want to reach out to him and let him know what you're thinking, if you have any questions, please do follow up. And I'll make these available after the presentation. I'll put a link in the post so people can download them and have them if they would like.
Yeah, and again, I'm hopeful that with these conversations, people get excited about the breed when they try be more kind when they talk about, oh, that's a small horse, or a good horse, it's ugly, whatever. There's no horse that is ugly, just the eyes that look at them. Every horse has a purpose, and every horse has a history, every horse has a culture. We as humans that are custodians of these animals, and we chose to be custodians of these animals, we have to be responsible, we have to be committed, and we have to understand the value of each one of the breeds, especially those that are endangered. So thank you for this opportunity, and I'm very hopeful that we all can preserve this breed together.
Thank you, Alejandro. That was wonderful. That is an awful lot of information, and I know you had to really narrow down all that you know. I know you wrote a thesis on this topic. Yeah, so thank you for sharing those little bits of your knowledge. And if folks want to learn more, they can certainly reach out to us and get your email address or your contact information for your Facebook page. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. This was a treat.
Thank you. You're very welcome for the invitation, and reach out, right? I hope to work more with your organization, which I'm a member of, and I'm happy to be a member of, and I hope more people join it because we need the dollars to keep the preservation. We know that money is austere and there's not much given to not-for-profit organizations, and we should support one another. And you guys are doing a great work with other breeds, and we want this same thing happening to our Paso Fino. And I hope this stimulate other people to get involved and get more conscious about it, and understand that, as I mentioned, do not cross. And when we lost it, it's lost forever, and then we cannot look back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that wonderful testimonial.
You're very welcome, and I understand that you're going to put this online for other people's recorded. It's going to be recorded, and if you can just share that information, that would be lovely.
I would be happy to. It'll be available here on our Facebook page. This will also be available on our YouTube page, and then also an audio recording will be available wherever people listen to podcasts. So please like, share, subscribe, get the word out about this amazing breed. We're so excited about it. Just a big shout out and thank you to everybody who posted questions and let us know that you're here and shared all your love and testimonials about how amazing this breed is. Those are priceless. That's amazing. Like, I always love to see how much people love it. Like, it warms my heart. And also thank you to everybody who's a member. You help make programs like this possible, help us get the word out about these amazing horses. So if you're not a member, please consider becoming one so that we can continue providing this type of content and talking to amazing people. And that's the end of my shameless plug for today.
Thanks, Brittany. And thank you so much for being here, Alejandro. You're very kind.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We'll be back next week on Monday. We'll be talking about the Rocky Mountain horse with Marketing Monday with Ryan. So tune in next week on Monday. And everyone, please have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.